Donc, je suis Mario Cristiani de la Galleria Continua et ce soir je suis très heureuse d'être ici avec Hans op de Beeck et on travaille avec lui depuis 2006 et il exprime en façon poétique que vous pouvez le voir dans les choses qu'il va montrer après lui et qu'il va expliquer beaucoup mieux que moi.
I'm a visual artist. I've been evolving towards all media. Installations, video, drawings, watercolors, photography, film, animation films. In this case I thought, okay, now I'm an architect in the 50s, commissioned to develop the ideal house for young families to move to. And so I produced this kind of ugly, inept house that you have over here. I'm showing this visual fiction, this sculpted outdoor scene, as a kind of diorama that, of course, is quite melancholic. The light is very soft. The mist is going through the landscape. It is something very, very quiet. There is no plot. There is no technique of storytelling. It is more like giving the very scenery where something could take place or just took place. This is a film in which the camera pans along 3 table moments. This is a marriage table. And it's really like The Bold and the Beautiful, you know, it's this kind of fake glamour that I come from a very modest background, and when parents organize a marriage, it would be like that, you know, like with over-the-top fake glamour kitsch, and so in my films I really like to show off a bit with this kind of hilarious kitsch that we sometimes collect as human beings. And then there is another table, which is more like a well-to-do surrounding with a pater familias who invites his family to have a celebration for his 60th birthday. So as a spectator in this film, you're just observing them as a choreography of banal gestures. And so this is a coffee and pie meal after a funeral. And so the people are all 70 plus, so probably the deceased didn't have any relatives anymore, and just, you know, the local elderly people show up just, you know, to have someone there, and because it's free pie and coffee, and they're just cracking jokes. They're not really sad. So Sea of Tranquility is a total exhibition. So when you enter this show, it gives you the impression that you're visiting a museum dedicated to a very mysterious boat. And this is my boat you see over there. And this boat is called the Sea of Tranquility. It's a ship that doesn't exist. It's a fiction again. It's not science fiction. It's a ship that actually could exist. So I consulted a boat engineer, and I showed him my design. I said, can this float? He says, yes, it can float, but you can't arrive in any port because it's too big, and it will use a lot of gasoline. I said, that's fine, you know. It's a virtual boat, so it doesn't matter so much. Money is not an issue for a virtual project, but at least I knew that my design was credible. So this ship could factually be true. It could exist. And so my museum is dedicated to this fiction. And this is my captain, who does not only appear in the film that I made, a film of half an hour, where you enter the ship. He is also present as a statue, as a sculpture within the museum. It's also to celebrate this fake captain. And together with the captain, in this fictional museum, there is a chambermaid, who mostly is an Asian person. And the chambermaid is also standing in the museum, but she's more like oriented towards a corner, and she's standing a bit off in a separate space, because she should be the one who should not be seen when you're on board of the ship. She should be the one that remains invisible and just quietly changes your sheets in your cabin. And also what I put in this museum is something like this. These are sleep containers, because many workers, in case of a new construction of a new largest cruise liner to date, many workers don't have decent housing and have to sleep in sleep containers. And then in the last room of my museum, you can sit down, and then you can observe, you can watch, and you can experience a film in which you are taken on board of my ship. There is no language, there's no dialogue, there's no storyline. It's really, again, an evocation. So when you watch the film, which takes half an hour, you're really taken on board of the ship. You're confronted with the eros and the thanatos on board of the ship. You're confronted with the boredom, with the leisure, with how things are organized. This is the machine room, and this is not a futuristic dish. It's really something that it's edible. You know, you can eat it. These are people working in the meat. The cook secretly smoking a cigarette. The Thai massage, and there's plastic surgery on board of my ship as well. Because I thought if you go on board in France and you're for 3, 4, 5 weeks on anonymous waters, of course it's a perfect setting to have your face redone. So, and then you come back, or you go to the States, or you come back to Europe, and you just have a new face, you know. So, and this is the singer who sings a song, which is also called Sea of Tranquility. And it's the first time I composed music myself for my own film. And this is someone who has the funeral of her husband on board of the ship, because there is a personalized funeral service on board of the ship. And you can have the ashes spread on the water. The theater where, of course, you have Brazilian dancers. So the whole project was really very, very much talking about how we live, conceive, and stage today. So it was really a kind of reflection, a kind of poetical reflection on how we create myths and how we create things that we give value to that don't have this kind of content that we would expect to find. This is a film I produced quite recently. It's a film with 800 people. It was commissioned by the city of Antwerp, and so I was working with all these people, which was a very moving project to do for me. It was a film on a film project on migration, and I choreographed 800 people, and I asked them to quietly perform gestures collectively, all together. And because when you have a big group of people that collectively perform something entirely quiet, it's an enormously moving power that you then vibrate. You know, there's something about this film when you watch it that really, to me, is very, very moving, because it's people that are just collectively performing something without saying a word. And when I was on the film set and I asked this whole group of people to quietly lie down when I gave a signal, they just all did, and it was so beautiful. There was such a moving quietness and tranquility on this film set, regardless of the fact that there was an enormous group of people all together. And so there's also a point where the whole group takes a shower, and of course it has all these references to Holocaust and many, 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 many things. But there is no tormented faces, or there's no expressions. I directed everyone in the film to be very calm and serene about everything they did. And so they just calmly showered, they calmly gave a hug, or they calmly laid down, or spread out some blankets. Every movement was very calm, but it was collective. And this is the thing that in that film is quite important. These are stills of a film I produced in India. It was commissioned by Deepak Anand, who lives here in Paris and who is an Indian curator, who asked me to go to India and to produce a work, which for me was difficult because I'm not a documentary maker and I need fiction. So what I did, I went to a part of India, to Karnataka, to an area where you have these kind of strange rock formations that look a bit like enormous cobblestones. And I found my fiction in the real landscape, so it was the other way around. Instead of working with fiction and trying to create something authentic as an experience to the viewer, I departed from something existing and authentic, and I tried to find my fiction in there. And so I made this film, and I only filmed this little village where I was living for a couple of weeks. I only filmed just before it started to rain. And so during the whole film you feel the sky is pregnant of rain, but it's not yet there. You know, it's about to happen, but it doesn't happen. This is a film which I have been showing extensively the past year and a half. I had about 4 solo presentations in American institutions with this film, because it's a film that is an exhibition by itself. It's called Staging Silence 2. And in this film you have 2 pairs of anonymous hands that rearrange the world in front of your eyes as a spectator. So when you're watching the film, you see those 2 pairs of hands like anonymous puppeteers who are changing the world in front of your eyes. For example, this hand screws in a light bulb and it becomes the sun. So all kinds of banalities are transformed into something serious. It's ridiculous stuff like sugar which is poured on a table and it all of a sudden transforms itself into a snow landscape. These are just plants from my living room that I put together on a water surface and it becomes like a jungle. And at the end of the film you see these hands constructing a kind of Dubai-like skyline. This is, the hands are just piling up sugar cubes. And towards the end of the film you have this entire cityscape made of sugar cubes. But then a very hot black liquid, which could be coffee, is poured on the sugar cubes. And in no time, it's transformed into a ruin. And when you see this film projected on a decent size, it's very dramatic. Yet it's just sugar cubes, It's something very simple. This is a very quiet sculpture. It's just my own hand that I casted. And this plaster hand is holding a saucer with some blackberries. The blackberry as a thing, to me, is like a little jewel. When I was a little boy, I always used to pick blackberries in the forest with my brother, every summer. They really transport me back to my youth. And I thought when someone offers you something as small and little and precious as just a blackberry, it's a beautiful gesture. It has nothing to do with my personal story, but just the fact that someone has the attention or thinks about you. Then there is another work. This work is this gesture, I call this work cherishing. It is about holding something precious in your hands. This was also quite beautiful. I was writing a text and all of a sudden there was this paper plane passing by. And just looking at the simplicity of this paper plane, which was folded by one of my kids, and just traveling in front of my eyes, it was so poetic and so beautiful. And of course, there's a kid behind that story, someone threw it. And this is also why I made this gesture sculpture of just the hand throwing a paper plane, because it's something extremely light and silly and banal, but at the same time there's an enormous beauty in the simplicity of that gesture, of just throwing this paper plane, or planting a tree, or a hand calmly writing. And this is all made in plaster, so the tablecloth is sculpted in plaster as well. And then I continued on this path. I made this still life with a plastic guitar. The weight of the guitar is 80 kilos. It's enormously heavy. And now I have a film of 15 minutes. It's the last film I produced. It's a film which is based on the watercolor paintings that I've been producing through all those nights, the past 15 or the past 5 years. And so I tried to animate the watercolors into a very quiet movie of 15 minutes. The music is composed by the Belgian pop musician Tom Pintens.